So, this is the introduction to the series of essays that we are broadcasting, marking the anniversary of the Khoodeelaar campaign rally held at 5 p.m., that is 1700 hours GMT, on Sunday, 22nd of January 2006, at the Brady Centre in Hanbury Street off Brick Lane. So, this is the introduction, which means by definition, it will be only a few minutes, but we shall be continuing, going over all the key aspects in a series of essays in the editions to come. So, this is Sunday, the 22nd of January 2023, and we shall be talking about the current so-called debate or discussion about the state of corruption at the center of the UK government. But one item that is very rare, they're very rare indeed, which is featured in the Sunday Times magazine on page, it's a long piece for the magazine, and it's headed, "Let Me Dig Up My Bitcoins." That is a man called James Howells, who has 107 million pounds on a hard drive. The only problem is that he's thrown the hard drive away. Will council officials let him and his crack team recover it from landfill? Steve Bogan reports. Now, this is a site in the Wales. Howells, beside the Newport Transporter Bridge over the river Usk, his treasure is believed to be buried on a landfill site on the other side. So this is rare. In fact, this is the only time that I have come across any newspaper or media item concerning the contents of a hard drive. And this is absolutely unique on several levels. This finding by me, my citing of it. Because anyone who has been carefully watching this program would remember references to the damage caused by the lies of Lutfur Rahman, the incumbent in the post of mayor, at the expense of the people in Tower Hamlets. Lutfur Rahman's lies centrally contributed to the series of losses, thefts, and concealment of hard drives. Now, hard drives, unless it is being discussed by people in front of people who are familiar with the use of computer disks and computer systems, hard drive is not something that can be explained as easily as it may sound. Hard drive, when it comes to the actual contents, depends on the person who uses the particular hard drive, like this James Howells. Others may use it as just a storage for very, very small quantity of data. But to somebody who has been using or having to use a hard drive to store contents that are original, the contents that are uniquely created, a hard drive contains, understandably, material, information that is worth any amount of currency. Bitcoins here, he has got 107 million pounds worth of bitcoins in there. But I can say that the hard drive, which is a current, kind of recent, comparatively recent data storage device. I mean, it is the latest form. The others have preceding it, or the hard drive form, have been disks and other forms that cannot be detailed comprehensively. Essentially, hard drive is the latest one that has the intensity that the previous forms don't have. So, how does Lutfur Rahman, the incumbent in the post of mayor in Tower Hamlets, come in? Today, in Whitechapel, in a chance meeting with Chris Weavers. Chris Weavers is no longer actively occupying the post in the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets that he held for a very long time. And Chris Weavers is party to the criminal behavior by Roshnara Ali and a former councillor in Tower Hamlets. The criminal behavior of Roshnara Ali concerns the collusion and complicity with Tower Hamlets Council during 2011. And Chris Weavers had been made fully aware of all the damages and all the contents that were affected by the criminality that Rushnara Ali was complicit in. Rushnara is not the only one. The other current MP for Tower Hamlets constituency, Afsana Begum, was employed as a Tower Hamlets Council employee, and she was employed in the mayor's office. And she sent me a number of emails on behalf of Lutfur Rahman and on behalf of Ohid Ahmed. She only sent the emails. She didn't create the actual contents of the emails. She may have written them, or somebody may have helped her to write a version or versions that she sent me. But essentially, the information came from Lutfur Rahman, Alibur Chowdhury, and Ohid Ahmed. And between the two of them, separately acting, Rushnara Ali and Afsana Begum are parties to crimes, and they have got outstanding duties to discharge. But the crimes that we are referring to here are crimes that were originally committed by individuals in the Tower Hamlets community housing and condoned by Lutfur Rahman and allowed to be perpetrated because Lutfur Rahman was handled because he is a stooge. Lutfur Rahman was handled by criminals based in the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre to sabotage the work that our campaign has been doing. And all this campaign work included properties, data, information contained in hard drives. Understood? So this is the piece in the Sunday Times today, Sunday Times magazine today, which on page 16, it said digging for millions. Now we are demanding for billions. So this is James Howells chucked out a hard drive full of Bitcoin. He tells Steve Bogan about his quest to recover it. Now, we didn't throw out any hard drive. We didn't throw out any of the storage devices. The storage devices, including the hard drives, contain work, consolidated work, continuing, original, creating, absolutely world exclusive original work created over decades. So if his hard drive, one hard drive contains 107 million pounds worth of bitcoins, then our hard drives contain many hundreds of times multiplied by that. That is how the billions come in. So we shall be in the essay, the series of essays that we shall be broadcasting and publishing as part of the updater anniversary of the Khoodeelaar rally held on the 22nd of January 2006 at the Brady Centre in the Hanbury Street. We shall be giving chapter and verse of how the criminals did the crimes and how the criminal colluding and being in complicity with the crimes and criminality perpetrated their complicity and collusion. And Lutfur Rahman, I mean, today Chris Weber said that Lutfur Rahman hasn't got any pushback against the allegations that have been made against him. And I said to Chris Weber that Lutfur Rahman hasn't got the evidence. Lutfur Rahman hasn't got the evidence to make or even begin to make any attempt to deny the allegations and the claims against him. Now, the claims against Lutfur Rahman were being made in advance of his crimes or in advance of the major parts of the crimes. For example, in my clear, on the record, filmed demand to him, advice to him, witnessed by people who are on the film, on Friday the 29th of October 2010, outside the Brick Lane Mosque, was that he must sit down with me and listen to me. One of the things I said was that the very existence of the Bangladeshi community in the UK was put at risk by his behavior if he failed. If he failed to listen to the actual, specific, factual instructions, really, and act accordingly immediately. So the hard drives that we can talk about and refer to in the context of today's coverage of another person losing the hard drive and looking for his hard or single hard drive. We had equivalent of hundreds of hard drives. And those hundreds of hard drives contained not bitcoins, but more valuable contents. Original analysis, reports, investigations, manuscripts, and all the rest of it that created over 6 decades and longer. And the hard drives also contain compressed information. That is to say, it would contain information that would be more extensive than the combined contents of all the Tower Hamlets idea store, for example. Take an example. Whatever the contents are, it would be bigger. One single hard drive would have contents bigger than the contents of all the Tower Hamlets idea store. Those who don't know Tower Hamlets cannot be blamed for not understanding the idea store. It is a word that I call idiot store, which is the idea store was introduced, I think, during the period of the controlling leader in Tower Hamlets Council of the Crook, Michael Crook. And it's called idea store which was a replacement of the ward library. So if you take into account about 20, let's say, libraries from Tower Hamlets, the contents would still be less than the contents of a hard drive. Depends also on the size of the storage divided the capacity. And so therefore Lutfur Rahman is responsible because of his idiocy. He may not have realized the extent of it, but because of his idiocy, he didn't keep his promise. In the conversation that I filmed with him in front of witnesses in Brick Lane, outside the Brick Lane Mosque, on Friday the 29th of October 2010, he said 6, 7, or 8 times that he would meet with me and listen to me. Well, that is the expression. He didn't use it 7 times in the same way, but he meant that by the said, settle Izaigi. He said, after settling down in Siloti language, settle Izaigi boimone. That is to be interpreted in the context as being the full sentence, which is that as soon as I am settled in the new post, in October 2010, it was the new post that he had been, quote, elected to, he would settle down, he would sit down with me. And as I have been qualifying, he has sat down, he did sit down with me more than once, but he never actually sat down to listen to what I had to say. He sat down with other things, and mainly he sat down or had conversations with me to evade or avoid being accused of not sitting down with me or talking to me. Because of his artificiality, because as I said, he's a stooge. He's been a stooge. And as a stooge, he doesn't always necessarily understand the gravity and the significance of his activities that are actually conducted through his being a stooge. Today, when I visited the Greater Haque Street, and there is this building in the Micro Business Centre, and I was reading the list of the organizations that are cited in the Micro Business Centre, and a big sized rat came out of the bottom of one of the buildings. Big sized rat, literally. And I was visiting that as part of the updater evidence of the anniversary of the 22nd of January 2006 rally in nearby Montefiore Center. Sorry, nearby Brady Centre, near the Montefiore Center. Not the Montefiore Center, but the Brady Centre is opposite, on the opposite side of the street. The street being the Hanbury Street. And the reason I was standing in the Greater Haque Street was actually to also refresh myself and take a picture of the spot where the very last Khoodeelaar rally took place in October 2004. And that was, the spot was just outside what is called the Evelyn House, which is at the corner of Old Montague Street, Brick Lane, Greater Haque Street, and the other side, the street changes the name from Old Montague Street. Now, Old Montague Street is the street where Lutfur Rahman has had his family housed for a very long time. And the Old Montague Street is a small street or short street parallel, which runs parallel to the Whitechapel Road, where the East London Mosque is situated. And I spoke to Chris Weavers at the corner of the Valence Road and the Whitechapel Road, outside the chemist that is now sited on the western side of the Valence Road. What is it called? The Daniel Lewis family. The Lewis, the chemist connected or owned by the Lewis family, the actor Daniel Lewis. And what is Chris Weaver's recollection? I asked Chris Weavers, how did the Labour Party allow Lutfur Rahman to get back on the 5th of May 2022? At first, Chris Weavers was miles away. He didn't understand what I was saying. I didn't actually say it in this particular way on the phone. I said, how did they do it? How did they let him get back in? Chris Weavers was miles away, so he needed me to clarify to him what I was meaning. And he said that he was no longer actively involved in the activities of the Labour Party. And he said somebody called James King was involved. I shall, of course, make due inquiries about what James King was doing. And Chris Weaver's view about Lutfur Rahman getting back in was simplistic one. I don't think that Chris Weaver's really is into thinking about this, or he said that the Labour Party became complacent after the previous election. And he said that they didn't do the necessary work, which on the face of it may sound accurate, but it's not the whole story. There were many factors involved, including the Labour Party corruption, including Chris Weaver's complicity and collusion in the corruption in the Labour Party for years. And that is where the reference to Roshnara Ali's corruption comes in. Now, I sat down with Chris Weavers in a restaurant in Brick Lane where I paid the bill, or I paid the what is called tabs. And that was the time when Isabella Freeman, the criminal, was still in post in Tower Hamlets as the monitoring officer. And I told Chris Weavers what I said to Lutfur Rahman. That was before Lutfur Rahman, I think, got in. He was in a councillor, but he was not in the position that he later got into. But I can check that. I cannot check this right now because the files are not in front of me. What Chris Weavers failed to do is to answer the questions. And Chris Weavers passed the bucks. He was the main kind of controlling operative in the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets at the time. And he was in possession of more information than other Labour Party post holders in the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets were at the time. But he neglected to attend to the information that I gave him. And I gave him the information that I had also given to another Labour Party member, a Bangladeshi called Sanu Mia. Sanu Mia was very close to those who were running the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, and he was a witness. Sanu Mia was a witness to one aspect of the consequences of Lutfur Rahman's lying. That is why I got Sanu Mia as one of the listed people that were circulated the information that I was sending to Chris Weavers, demanding action against the criminals, including with Lutfur Rahman fronted council's criminal gangs. The Sanu Mia recently told me that he had lost access to the email address that I communicated to him. Let me just check how many emails are there, because By how many emails are there, I am actually referring to the hacking. With all these email communications that I create and I have been sending to them, various parties, I take it as a given that they will be hacked. And many of the emails that have been created and put on the system have been hacked, not just to steal the contents, but to delete the contents, because they think that by deleting the emails, the evidence that I do send to them, and the evidence that I do send to them, this evidence is copied already in anticipation that they would be deleting them or they'll be stealing the information. And this applies to all the criminals that I have been in communication with. Now, that is a contextual part of the essay in observing the anniversary of the Khoodeelaar rally held on the 22nd of January 2006 at the Brady Centre. Now, today I noticed for the first time, because I never had actually the time to look at that side of the foundation notes that are on the wall. It's in the Brady Centre. The Brady is the name that has been retained, but the Centre is a replacement of the phrase Boys Club, Brady Boys Club, which was founded not necessarily in that building, because the building was opened in 1935 by then Duke of or Duchess of York. This Brady Boys Club was founded in the 1890s. So the Brady comes from the Brady Boys Club, Brady Centre. So 1890s, 1990s, it's just under 200 years, let's say, under 200 years. It's a long local location, let's say, or name. So the Brady Centre was the venue for the biggest community event by the Bangladeshis since Bangladesh became an independent recognized state in December 1971. There have been meetings with gatherings having larger, wider number of people than that rally had. But those meetings have not been definable as being UK based Bangladeshis defending the community in the UK. That is different from any gathering that have been held by Bangladesh based political groups or political parties. And most of them, by definition, have been like used as kind of zombies. But here, on the 22nd of January 2006, people came to attend the rally in response to the campaign appeal and the campaign demand that I was leading. And the people came, responded from various parts of Europe, because the name Brick Lane is synonymous with the front line of the Bangladeshis or Bangladeshi based community anywhere in the world outside of Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, there is no place, one place anywhere in Bangladesh, including in Silot, which can be equated to the impact and the representative nature that Brick Lane, or the message that the two words Brick Lane carry. As I said, when he last visited, when he visited the first time Brick Lane as president of Bangladesh, the late Ziaur Rahman held up a street name called Brick Lane at a meeting, that rally he addressed. And he said that he would name a street in Dhaka in Bangladesh, the capital of Bangladesh, after Brick Lane, in recognition of the role played by the people of Bangladeshi origin and based in and around Brick Lane. That is the truth of the actual record of the people's contribution that was being recognized for the first time and ever by any Bangladeshi head of state. I shall talk more about what I did to make that event possible. I didn't attend the rally on the platform, but I did the organizing, and that's what I shall be discussing. That what they did was to produce a political pamphlet commemorating Ziaur Rahman's visit. And when I went to see him at the hotel, just to kind of formally extend the conversation with a group of other people, he had in his hand the pamphlet that I had created in commemoration of his visit. So that showed that he had already read this and he had been impressed by the contents of it. And we shall be talking about that again, a historic exclusive document and documentary that I created. And the hard drives, all the hard drives contain similar materials. So when Lutfur Rahman promised to sit down with me after settling down, he had no idea what I would be discussing with him. But in the period following that meeting, well, that meeting, he didn't plan that meeting. I planned that meeting. That is to say, I was ready to film him coming out of the Brick Lane Mosque because I knew that he had gone to Brick Lane Mosque instead of going to the East London Mosque, which is where his controllers are based in. That he had gone to Brick Lane to create a false impression about him being closer to the Bangladeshi community outside of the connection with the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is what the East London Mosque is controlled by. Now, in that unprepared kind of state, Lutfur Rahman wasn't able to kind of comprehensively tell a lie. He did lie because he made a promise which he didn't keep. But that's all he could do. He couldn't do an elaborate statement of lying. Had he met with me with any decent, clear, honest, moral, ethical commitment to democracy, to accountability, to transparency, then he would have been able to get the equivalent of 10, 20 billion pounds worth of material that currently are the subject of this series of essays and demands and references, protected and prevented from being stolen or damaged or taken away or hidden, concealed. Just give an example. The contents that I'm referring to originate from New Road, London E1. And that happened in November 1993. We lost control of New Road location in November 1993 because of the racists controlling the property section of the hospital. And we shall come later, not necessarily this edition, the information that is involved, but in the course of the series of essays that I shall be discussing the role of the Royal London Hospital property section. Because they were told about this. They were told that a lot of intellectual properties and other documentary materials would be affected if they didn't stop there getting rid of the property freehold at an auction. Not only that particular address, but a number of addresses based in the New Road area, which the Royal London Hospital controlled. Now, why did they take that action to auction these? The simple answer is that they were racist and they were criminally negligent, because they didn't want to make the properties safe. They didn't want to repair the properties. So when we demanded that they repair the properties, because there was an accident in September 1987 when the ceiling fell, and I and the kitten that I was holding, we escaped just narrowly. After that happened, it could have happened more dangerously, let's say. So this was an absolute emergency. So we brought attention to the incident of the properties people in the Royal London Hospital. What did they do? Instead of repairing, instead of apologizing, instead of offering to compensate, they put the whole property at an auction, including that one. So we shall talk more about the implications and the extent of the damage that followed. And all the damages that followed on that side originated from the Royal London Hospital. The property is criminals. And so therefore, because of the size of the materials, it's not like one pack, one box, or what. It is like lorries when needed. So the properties were transported across East London, across Tower Hamlets mainly, but not necessarily exclusively, because over the years that followed, one criminal controlling one building transported the properties to a storage location in Newham without my knowledge, let alone approval, of course. So all of these happened several trips by lorries. So you can imagine the amount of paper material documents. Then you add the storage devices, the hard drives, and similar. And you can begin to build a picture of billions of pounds worth of contents. And how did they happen? Because all the creative work was conducted without any break over 60 plus years. So if you multiply 60 years, let's say, for mathematical simplicity here, you can begin to see the picture. And if you see work being conducted, creative work, documentary work being created over 6, 7 active hours every single 24 hours, you can begin to see the amount, the volume that was being created. Original, exclusive, world exclusive, original materials. So that is what Lutfur Rahman would not have understood without going through all of this. But he never sat down to understand, because he was instructed as a stooge by his controllers based at the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre, so-called, to sabotage the work, to offer no support and no cooperation. Now that is, in every respect, in every faith, it's a haram, forbidden, criminal act. So the East London Mosque-based criminals, not the East London Mosque itself, but the criminals based at the East London Mosque, the criminals based at the London Muslim Centre, were using Lutfur Rahman as their stooge to do damage that he, not they, not their ancestors could ever imagine. let alone create. So that's the complexity of the issues, which is why in previous broadcasts I have said that this will be discussed at length another time. This is the reason. So this article in the Sunday Times magazine today, James Howells, back in based in Wales. This is the place where this camera will not catch the full article, but that's the article on pages 16 onwards. Well, pages 16, let's see, the 16 and 17 are the pages used for the heading by the magazine. This is the heading. So his heading is, I'll put this in the that's the page 16 and 17 of the magazine, where he's saying that let me dig up my bitcoins. And this is a message to all the individuals that I've named. Chris Weavers. Chris Weaver said to me today something that he always has said to me almost every time that I've had any conversation with him, except when we seated and were at some kind of meeting or having a meal, as I paid for the meal in order to prevent him from running away from the conversation. It was cost me $50. That was the reason I decided to go into the restaurant with him. In case he didn't know, I didn't have to go to that restaurant at all. Now, Chris Weber says, I'm going to meet somebody. What the fuck is he always meeting that is more important than me? Who the fuck is there in Tower Hamlets that is always about to meet and go and meet in order to avoid the conversation? And the reason is that nobody. The reason is, and I'm putting this on the record, come on, challenge me. I've called him to account many times, and I'm doing this the latest time today. I never planned this conversation with him today. I bumped into him and he said hello, and I stopped and I told him what I thought, and I said, why did the Labour Party allow Luthuroman to get in again? And he didn't understand. So I had to explain to him. All of that took about 6 or 7 minutes. Now the Labour Party, nationally or centrally, is being promoted by the right-wing media as almost being ready to be given the, let's say, keys to number 10, etc. But as we have said, Keir Starmer is a criminal. Keir Starmer is not only a criminal, but he is a political murderer of the Labour Party. Which means that people like Rachel Reeves and others, that Keir Starmer is kind of having as his leading front bench persons, like Keir Starmer has had Rachel Reeves, and the crooked, lying shitbag called West Streeting. These are not going to deliver any real comprehensive answer to the or alternative to the what the conservatives are doing, because these are conservatives. And they're worse than the conservatives, because you can tell the conservatives, and I shall come to Nadeem Zahawi, the crook, in a minute. These conservatives, you can't tell them because they say that they're liver. Now, Nadeem Zahawi, where do you begin? Nadeem Zahawi, even the Sun, I mean, the Sun is not a kind of ethical outlet, is it? But even the Sun is claiming today, the Sun on Sunday, is claiming today that they effectively reported on Zahawi's failure to pay the taxes. I mean, the Sun and Sunday. It's not the Sun and Sunday is not. Well, it's the news of the world after Murdoch was forced to scrap the news of the world. But the Sun and Sunday, this is what the Sun and Sunday say. Look at the amount of newspapers that I'm handling here. So this is what the Bitcoin's hard drive cannot contain, because literally millions of pages of newspapers are studied by me every year. Well, newspaper contents, let's say, directly and indirectly. So if I've studied millions every year, just multiply that by 60 years and you can see just how much reading I have been doing. And what is the actual outcome of the reading? Outcome is the collection of the perspective, the interpretation, the analysis that you cannot find anywhere else. Humanity needs this. And this is today's Sun on Sunday has got the five words: Tory gong axed over Texas. Gong meaning that in December there was this kind of announcement, wasn't it? Well, announcement was finalized in December. It was made in the new year, few days ago maybe, where there is a list of the ones that will be given the knighthood, honors, etc. And Zahawi was included in the potential kind of list as a potential knight. And this is what the Sun on Sunday say. Crisis hit Tory Nadeem Zahawi was prevented from getting a knighthood after Whitehall staff raised questions about his tax affairs. Now, this is written by Kate Ferguson, political editor. It seems I haven't come across her work until today, because I haven't noticed, because the one that preceded her, it seems, David Wooding was not really producing any copy like this one. That is the first thing I'll say about the difference between Wooding, the previous political editor, and this Kate Ferguson, who appears to be the current political editor of the Sun on Sunday. So she says, the bombshell revelation heaps fresh pressure on the party chairman, who is battling for his political career. Multimillionaire Mr. Zahawi, 55, was nominated for the gong, that is the knighthood, in the recent New Year's honors list. But the former chancellor did not appear on the list of recipients after experts at HMRC were contacted by the Cabinet Office, which oversees the vetting of honors. Questions were raised over his tax affairs during the discussions which took place in December. A source told the Sun on Sunday Nadeem had been put forward for a knighthood. As part of the normal due diligence, cabinet officials contacted HMRC in December. Nadeem subsequently did not appear on the list in the new year. It comes a week after the Sun on Sunday exclusively revealed that after months of scrutiny, Mr. Zahawi had agreed to pay millions of pounds to settle his tax affairs. Yesterday, Mr. Zahawi finally issued a statement. He admitted for the first time He had paid up to settle the tax row, but he insisted that any mistakes were a careless and not deliberate error. Now, fuck off. Now, imagine an ordinary individual who, based on their income, etc., are liable for paying tax and they don't pay the tax. Have they been ever allowed to even think of saying it was careless of them? Fuck the fucking criminal conservative Nadim fucking Zahawi crook. How dare they? And the Sun and Sunday, despite the fact that they claim, this Kate Ferguson, that they exclusively, etc., reported on him, how the fuck do they not investigate the validity, the acceptability of this criminal excuse? This is not part of a constitution. This is not part of anything. This is part of a gang of criminals being allowed to say that they were careless. That criminal Johnson, I mean, it features on the Sunday Times, and I'll come to that Sunday Times article about the BBC. I mean, chain of crimes are being committed. Well, chains of crimes are being committed in everything, every dealing, every transaction, every relationship. They have. They say that. I mean, this Sky News press preview that appeared last night about Sunday papers with Christine Patterson on the one hand and this very right wing editor, very right wing. He looks like a right winger. He looks like a creepy right winger editor of the so-called Jewish Chronicle. Why say so-called why? Because the history of the Jewish people's struggle against racism and discrimination is not really reflected in the contents, the political contents of the Jewish Chronicle, edited by the likes of this right-wing creep. This right-wing creep normally appears opposite this Christina Patterson, and he always has an excuse like this other one. I mean, the other one that the Sky News kind of pair together. On the one hand, Susie Boniface, also known as the Fleet Street Fox, opposite Ali Miraj or Ali something. The Ali something gives the name that he suggests. It suggests that he's a Muslim, but he's a complete, absolute fucking criminal. He always has an excuse. He always has an excuse for the right wingers. He's got an excuse for Starmer. He's got an excuse for whatever. I'm not saying that Susie Boniface is not a supporter of Starmer. She is, but the point is that she's only doing it opportunistically. But this Ali thing is ideologically and mentally kind of dedicated to the right wing. So what this whenever this item comes up about Tory doing some wrong, and it's always in the papers every single day the Tories are doing wrong, like Rishi Sunak. I mean, how could he not remember to put on the seatbelt? How on earth? It's symbolic. That idiot boy has got symbolic dysfunction. I mean, he's giving, apparently speaking on obviously he's speaking on live camera, and he's not wearing a seatbelt. How the fuck? So every single one of them in front page, kind of front cabinet position, is callous and is kind of neglecting what other people, ordinary people, would be punished for neglecting, if you like. So Zahawi said that it was careless mistake. There is no excuse in breaking the law, serious breaking the law, seriously breaching the law, called careless. No court, no court of law would allow an ordinary person to say that they were careless. They would be penalized, additionally penalized, for even attempting to say something like careless. There is no, in the so called English jurisprudence, there is no record of this kind of stupidity being allowed as part of the excuse. And it's not concerning a few £100. It's not concerning a few £1,000. It's millions of pounds, even fine. Okay, so he's a millionaire. Nobody knows how much wealth he owns, because he definitely has offshore accounts, and like Sunak has got, his wife has got. And so, going back to this is a long 2-page spread. It's an exclusive new shock of a party chairman. And it says he has paid millions in taxes. On the Sunday Times front page, and on the details in the paper inside pages, there is this article about Boris Johnson. Let's get to the front page of the Sunday Times. Boris Johnson getting the help of the BBC's chairman. Now, that headline is misleading, and I'll explain why. Because the BBC chairmanship, the post of the BBC chairmanship, was only available to that individual who became the chairman. Let's see if we can find that page. Okay, let's read this one. This one again, this is the kind of Sunday Times you can only have a glimpse. It says BBC boss helped arrange Johnson's £800,000 loan in Downing Street. Now, this headline should be that the person who helped arrange Johnson's loan was later appointed to the BBC's job as a reward. Well, they could have said within quotation marks a reward, because that's exactly what it was. It's by this same individual. This Gabriel Pogrand is one of the kind of investigative reporters on the Sunday Times currently. So he said the BBC chairman helped to arrange a guarantee on a loan of up to £800,000 for Boris Johnson weeks before the then Prime Minister recommended him for the role. That is effectively what it was, because Johnson was illicitly involved in appointing this individual chairman. The BBC has a reward for this individual helping Johnson secure a £800,000 guarantee from his so-called distant cousin based in Canada. What's happening here? We shall come to that. Richard Sharp was involved in talks about financing Johnson's Downing Street lifestyle in November and December 2020. Sharp, 66, a former banker at Goldman Sachs, had already submitted his application to become the BBC chairman and had reached the final stages of the recruitment process. Late in 2020, Johnson, 58, was in financial trouble as Johnson, faced divorce payments, child care costs, and bills for the refurbishment of his number 10 flat. Sharp, a friend and former advisor to the politician who has given £400,000 to the Conservative Party, became involved that November after a dinner at the home of Sam Blythe, an old friend in West London. Blythe, 67, a multimillionaire Canadian businessman and distant cousin of Johnson, is said to have raised the idea of acting as the Prime Minister's guarantor and asked Sharp for advice on the best way forward. Now, what does he mean by best way forward? These are criminals conferring best way forward, meaning how best to avoid being seen as involved in a crime or a series of crimes. Now, no court of law at any stage would accept that kind of behavior as being innocent. All the stages involved in the whole report, all the stages disclose and expose the parties involved as involved in crime or a series of crimes. So we got a gang. I mean, Nadine Zahawi got a temporary positive point at the expense of Boris Johnson during one of the many changes when they had to resign and appoint people, etc., etc. He was the one that hogged the headlines saying that he told Johnson to his face to resign because his staying, that Johnson staying in the post at that time was untenable. So Zahawi got a positive heading, like a credit, moral credit, let's say, temporary moral credit, because all the Tories are temporarily, only ever temporarily morally kind of standing anywhere before they fall to immorality. Like I'll refer to Theresa May, because when she was launching herself as the kind of champion for the majority of the Conservatives with decent mind at the beginning of the century, she is the one who launched herself by saying that the Conservatives needed to change because they were seen by the ordinary people as the nasty party. And here, the item immediately after the BBC boss helping arrange Johnson's loan is the headline: Illegal immigrants face return of May's, that is Theresa May's, hostile environment. Theresa May is the one who launched herself, her manifesto, if you like, personal manifesto, as a possible leader of the Conservatives by saying that the Conservatives had been seen by ordinary people as the nasty party. And here she is being referred to as the nasty one, as far as the, well, they don't use the quotation mark that they should do, because there is nobody illegal among the migrants. Majority of the people are legal. Let's explain this a bit. All the international treaties, agreements, declarations, etc., that the United Kingdom is signed up to have got provisions for people who are fleeing persecution, fleeing absolutely unbearable conditions at the originating countries which they're fleeing. And when they're seeking asylum, they're seeking refuge in a country like the UK, they're doing that because of the conditions they're trying to escape. They're not doing that in order to cheat the UK, the destination country. They're not doing that as part of a criminal enterprise. So when they do things like crossing the channel which is strictly speaking illegal. They're doing that because the British, one of the destination countries, have withdrawn their support that they're obliged to provide people fleeing persecution. So there is no option. So when these people are discovered as illegally entering or illegally having entered, they have done illegal only because the British forced them by their own illegality to commit this lesser illegality. Because the main illegality on the part of the United Kingdom government is to break the obligations they are under according to the treaties they have signed internationally. So, for example, when Johnson was in post as the number 10 incumbent, there was this terrible Gujarati Indian origin African woman called Priti Patel, Ugly Patel. She was the nasty one. Now, would anyone have ever thought that there would be anyone worse than Priti Patel with her Rwanda programs, etc., etc.? No one did. And then comes Cruella Ibila, Suella. So you've got Suella, you've got Priti Patel, and you've got Theresa May. And you've got Nadeem Zahawi, you've got Boris Johnson, and you've got the whole lot of them. The whole lot of them are criminals, depraved, lying, dishonest crooks. And worse, so where do you go? Where do you go for enlightenment? Not to Starmer or his crew. Which is why the media needs to be truthful, transparent, consistent, democratic, ethical, and moral. Now, there is one piece about Shamima Begum in the Sunday Times, which is not an original one. It's an artificial, it's a kind of, I'll come to the Shamima Begum piece in a little while. Now just have another look at the piece about BBC Chairman Richard Sharp. And it says BBC Chairman Richard Sharp was number 10's candidate. So it was quite clear, it makes very clear that Johnson was rewarding him with the post as chairman of the BBC in return for his role in playing the part in securing the guarantee through the so-called distant cousin, Blythe. Now, why do the newspapers, this is where the question comes as to what I said earlier in the previous paragraph, let's say, that the media is the only place that the truth can be told because the politicians are criminals and the main so-called high courts never prosecute, never really hold these criminals like Johnson to account. So where do people go? Ordinary people go for any truth, any light on the criminals going on and abuses of billions of pounds of public money being stolen and distributed among themselves. It's the media. That's where the media, the claim for press freedom becomes only tenable, only response kind of relevant when they tell the truth. When they don't tell the truth, then the press freedom doesn't make any sense at all. Let's go to the item that I said they're running about Shamima Begum. Let's see where it is. The piece about Shamima Begum is on page 15 of the Sunday Times today. Opposite the page 14, where Rod Liddle has his Sunday column, and he's mocking Rishi Sunak. He's not mocking Rishi Sunak spontaneously. He's doing that as part of the propaganda being run by Boris Johnson to undermine Rishi Sunak so that Boris Johnson can stage a return. Now, this heading about Shamima Begum reads this: Begum's remorse is a sham. She sees herself as a celebrity. Now, what they're talking about in this context is the podcast that the BBC has been publishing. And they're responding to her statement. And they're saying that she went to join IS of her own free will. The jihadi bride is blitzing the media as she battles to come back to Britain. But those who know her doubt she has changed. This is a piece by Glenn Keogh, Keogh. From the moment a teenage schoolgirl from East London lifted her veil and told the world she did not regret joining Islamic State, it seems everyone has had an opinion on Shamima Begum. Overnight, the 19-year-old with a blank stare, once predicted to achieve top marks in her GCSEs, became the face of the Islamic Caliphate. Discovered by the Times in a Syrian detention camp 4 years ago, Begum detailed her indifference towards the sight of her first severed head, while pleading to come home to give birth in Britain. 4 days later, she was stripped of her citizenship by then Home Secretary Sajid Javid. Stateless and unwanted, a diplomatic headache. To many, she should not leave the Al-Roj camp in northern Syria, where she whiles away the days. But Begum is determined to begin a new chapter. As she awaits the judgment of a special immigration appeals commission hearing on loss of her British citizenship, which will decide whether she was willing ISIS combatant or trafficked victim. Those who have met her wonder whether the country is prepared for Shamima. Well, they're giving account of Shamima 2.0, the celebrity. I don't understand the use of those letters here, but let's pass. Part 1 of the transformation has arrived. With Begum the subject of a controversial 10-episode BBC podcast, an upcoming feature-length television documentary airing as a judge decides on her citizenship appeal, with a decision expected by March. I'm Not a Monster claims to have secured the most in depth interviews with Begum conducted in her detention camp over the course of a year. Tory MP Giles Watling, who sits on the Commons Digital, Culture, Media, and Sports Committee, questioned whether we should give these people airtime. Responding to viewers' complaints, Jonathan Aspinwall, the podcast series editor, said, "We never take Shamima's account as necessarily the truth. Our job is to unpack, unpick. Our job is to test. Our job is to find out exactly what happened." Begum's story began in February 2015 when she and two fellow pupils from Bethnal Green Academy, Khadija Sultana 16 and Amira Abbasi 15, they wrongly spelled Abbas, showing the multiple ignorance on the part of all the people concerned with the name, left their homes and families and headed to Gatwick Airport for a flight to Istanbul, Turkey. From there, they were smuggled into Syria. 10 days after arriving in Raqqa, Begum, then 15, married Dutch Muslim convert Iago Rijik, 8 years her senior. Coverage gradually railed off or tailed off until February 2019 when Begum was found by the Times' war correspondent Anthony Lloyd. In an interview from the Al Haul camp, she told him life was mostly normal apart from bombing and stuff, revealing that she was pregnant with her third child. Her first two died owing to illnesses linked to malnutrition. Sultana was reportedly killed in an airstrike in 2016, and Abbasi was also presumed dead. But a plea for clemency in Britain was shattered by perhaps the most startling revelation. When I saw my first severed head in a bin, it didn't faze me at all, she said, adding it belonged to a captured fighter, an enemy of Islam. Now, without going into the repeat of the rehash of these things, she has no idea. She has no idea about what she's reportedly being quoted as saying. In Islam, absolutely no such thing exists as permissible. Islam totally forbids cruelty and all the other things that they are kind of ascribing to Islam. Now, that school became a mixed sex school despite my efforts to stop it from being a all boys single sex school to a mixed sex school in the years before Shamima Begum was even born. I tried in the 1994-95 to stop the local council changing the status of the school because of implications about the various things. We never thought about the because in 1984-85 there was no such thing as ICs or whatever. So we didn't think about those things. We did think about the lack of moral kind of standard, if you like, in the school, etc., etc. Now, I've mentioned this before, but we shall do that again later, another time, not this time, because it needs to be understood as to what goes on in the local area. Except to say in this edition that Lutfur Rahman comes in again, because these children, these girls, when they went to Syria in 2015, That is the first time we knew about them. We never knew about them before. We never knew anything about them other than by reading or watching the mainstream media. And this is the reason why we are reading this one and referring to this one. We wouldn't know about the BBC podcast without the reports being published about the podcast being started about her by the BBC, reading in the newspapers. Now, the reference to Lutfur Rahman is concerning the role of the local council. All the local councils are under legal duty, what is called the safeguarding the children duty. Now, if those children, Shamima Begum and the other two girls, were being safeguarded by the local council, then who knows? You never would have heard about them because they would not have turned out to be the girls that went to Syria or wherever. So the questions that we want answered, and we have been asking for answers to the question and related questions. What did the Tar Hamlets Council did? So far, Tar Hamlets Council has not been reported as having said anything. Why? Because neither the BBC nor the Sunday Times or the Daily Mail or whatever appear to have contacted Tar Hamlets Council. Remember? That's what we said, that the media have to be transparent and investigative and inquire into what is going on. That is the only role which brings in the reference to press freedom. If they don't tell the truth, if they don't seek the truth, then there is no press freedom, there is no reference, there is no relevance to anyone claiming to be denied press freedom. So, why is it? This is now calendar years 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, it's 8 years since those girls were reported to have gone to Syria in February 2015. Haven't the newspapers Haven't the newspapers got a single one among them, the journalists or editors, who is familiar with the duties of the local councils? This question shall stand, and we shall continue with this series of essays. And this is now 1 hour, 23 minutes, I think. We shall end this particular edition at 19, what was it, 10 hours GMT on the 22nd of January 2023, the first of the essays on the anniversary of the Khoodeelaar rally held at the Brady Centre on the Sunday, 22nd of January 2006.